Welcome to a splice of life science marketing, your go-to show for life science marketing professionals in biotech, medtech, and diagnostics. Join us for sharp, strategic conversations that turn cutting-edge insights into real-world marketing advantage. I'm Matt Wilkinson.
And I'm Jasmine Gruia-Gray. In each episode, we'll cut through the hype and complexity with practical plays you can use to earn trust, stand out in crowded categories, and convert attention into momentum.
Hey, Matt.
Hi, Jasmine. How you doing?
Good. How are things with you?
Very good, thank you.
Okay, so today we have another special episode on what has been keeping up a lot of marketers these days. Life science companies are being sold, in quotes, answer engine optimization, AEO, as the next frontier of marketing investment. You just wrote an article titled Separating Signal from the Snake Oil, and I love this title, Snake Oil in AI Search, and it cuts through the hype by grounding the debate in Google's own statements and independent data. In August 2025, Google's John Mueller publicly described the proliferation of AEO and GEO acronyms as spam and scamming. Danny Sullivan, on the other hand, Google's search liaison, was more measured, but reached the same conclusion. These are subsets of SEO, not new disciplines. The rebranding is largely commercial, and buyers should beware. The underlying shift, however, is real. AI-generated overviews now appear in 18 to 25% of Google queries, and when they do, organic position one results lose 34.5% of their clicks. LLM referral traffic grew 155% in 8 months versus 24% for traditional search. The trajectory matters more than the current 0.77% share of desktop activity. The structural disruption is visible in publisher analytics now, not in projections. The commercial stakes for life science tools companies are sharpened by 3 recurring patterns from Striven's own exhibitor research across LRIG Drug Discovery 2025, where we surveyed about 107 exhibitors, and SLAS 2026, where we surveyed 43 exhibitors. 62% of exhibitors had never asked an AI to recommend companies in their category. 44% had AI tools without any structured adoption program. And AI recommendation lists consolidate to roughly 5 brands per B2B category, a dynamic the article names citation compression. The window to establish AI visibility is closing, and most of the sector has not yet looked at whether they are in or out. So, Matt, what's going on?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, isn't it? On the one hand, we have this really important set of new channels, and I won't just call them one channel. It's like AI search is really a bit like calling it social media, where you've got the likes of ChatGPT, you've got Claude, you've got Perplexity, you've got Gemini, and you've got Google's own search within the Google window that uses Gemini as well. So you've got a lot of these new answer engines, if you will, and what really is staggering to me is that 62% of exhibitors at the booths had never once asked an AI to recommend companies in their category. So they'd never bothered to look, do we appear? That's a real sector-wide blind spot to me. And people aren't yet waking up to the fact that if you're not part of that search, if you don't appear in those 5 mentions, you're not necessarily going to be included in anybody's thinking. It's not like Google, where there are 100 pages that you can go through. There's just 5 answers that get surfaced, and you're not in those. You may not ever get that call.
I had the same experience. Some folks had a really blank look on their face when I brought this up. Others said, oh, that's a really good idea. I'm going to try that as soon as you leave the booth. But the overwhelming majority, as the data show, have not looked at this. But what's the actual commercial cost? Life science purchase decisions don't happen because a researcher typed a query in your favorite LLM
Mm.
and bought whatever appeared first. They happen through application specialists, distributor relationships, conference conversations, and sales cycles that span months. The channel driving this urgency is still less than 1% of desktop web activity.
It's hard to disagree with that for sure. And particularly for big capex investments, absolutely people are going to want to make sure that they're surveying everything. But I think that that's missing the point that often those conversations happen because you already know something exists. And when people already have brand affinity or they know about the brand, what Mark Schaefer would like to call the brand override. The framing that you sort of provided, it sort of treats AI discoverability as a traffic channel, and it isn't. As I mentioned earlier, if you rank fifth on Google, you're still in consideration. People are still seeing your brand. A buyer can still find you, even though they have to scroll down the page a little bit further. If AI doesn't include you in a category recommendation, the buyer may never know that you exist at all. And that's a categorically different problem. I think that's where this is really, really important to recognize just how important this is. And just to see the growth of these engines is absolutely staggering.
So I completely agree on the binary nature of this. But here's a different perspective. Among the exhibitors who actually did run the test, 75% found themselves listed, or at least claimed that they were listed. So the unconsidered set is mostly made up of companies that haven't looked, not companies that are genuinely absent. The crisis framing may be doing more work than the data supports.
That's hard to disagree with. The 75% figure, though, cuts both ways. It means that 25% who looked found they were not listed, and ones who never looked, what's their assumption?
Mhm.
They assume they're fine, or do they just not even think of this yet? The commercial cost of that assumption is deals you are not losing because you were never in the running. There are no losing signals. You just lose an RFP request to silence. So I think it's the case that the fact that you don't know what you're missing out on. I think that's really the key challenge here.
Yeah, it's kind of like that Rumsfeld statement, the known knowns and the known unknowns and so on.
It's definitely an unknown unknown. If you're not looking and you're not featured, you're an unknown unknown, and that becomes a very wicked problem to solve.
Agree. That is a compelling way to frame it, though. But I keep coming back to the budget question. 20 to 30% uplift to do this properly is not trivial for a lot of life science marketing teams already stretched across conference season, content production, CRM, and so on, digital marketing. The marginal hours spent on Wikidata entity consistency is probably worth less than the marginal hours spent on well-targeted campaigns to an existing segment.
Hard to disagree, particularly if you're measuring direct input hour for hour, but that does assume that the Wikidata hour doesn't compound. That's the citation compression argument. The brands establishing AI visibility now are setting the baseline model's default for the future years. So training data is not refreshed continuously. Early absence does not create a gap you can necessarily close later. It creates a structural problem that gets harder to challenge the longer you leave it. So, for example, if you're blocking the bots or you're not featured in the AI training data right now, then you're not going to be part of that default set. Yes, most of these models now have the ability to go out and search, and they do, but you're not updating the model, so you're not necessarily part of that default set. And that's important because one of the things that AIs look at for is, yes, there's the recency of how often you're publishing, but the other side of that is that if your brand is well established in a certain category, that gives you benefits as well. And so it's that kind of balance there is really critical to make sure that you maintain.
Still, nobody can actually prove that timeline. The compounding returns from early investments may not arrive when the urgency narrative implies. Acting in 2026 may be early enough. The window may be shorter than expected or longer, and we don't have the data to be confident either way.
The question is can you afford to take that risk?
Mhm.
And I think that's the really interesting challenge here. And One of the things that I don't think we've really talked about yet in this conversation is that it's really difficult to say that, oh, we need to go off and spend lots of money on answer engine optimization, generative engine optimization, all those sorts of things. A lot of this is good SEO. A lot of this is adding to that SEO program and doing, adding schema markup, making sure that Cloudflare, for example, isn't blocking the bots from addressing your website. But then there's also things like making sure that you're being featured regularly and offsite, that there's conversations that's happening. It takes us away from pure performance marketing and SEO being a thing that the experts do to something that everybody needs to do and the entire organization needs to focus on as a brand. And that's really where I think we need to go back to really, really good quality marketing and good marketing strategy and focus about what do we want to be known for.
So maybe in the second part of this conversation, we can pivot a little bit and talk more about the structural advantage versus the structural inertia.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think that life science companies have an unfair advantage in AI citation, or at least many do. Those that have large amounts of data or peer-reviewed data that feature their products and services as mentioned in methodologies, if they're out there, that gives them a really, really good advantage. Now, peer-reviewed publications, named scientists with verifiable institutional affiliations, clinical validation data with specific results, that's all gold for AI engines. An analysis of 36 million AI overviews found NIH content accounting for 39% of citations in health and science queries. Social platforms barely registered for those same queries, partly because the conversations that scientists are having are happening in elsewhere. They're happening on the NIH, they're happening in peer-reviewed journals. But that's where those conversations happen. It's letters to the editor. That's where the high-value conversations happen. Social platforms may be talking about tools and brand affinity, but they don't talk about the real science. And so that's really exciting.
So I can't dispute that advantage exists. What I often think about is whether organizations can actually access it. So some of these high impact journals, Nature, Science, Cell, are all gated. The reason content is ghost written and unattributed is not because life science marketers are unaware of attribution's value. It's because named scientists are busy, or on the other hand, reluctant to engage with marketing processes. They want to sort of be seen as a little bit more independent and not as shills for a particular company, and operate under institutional guidelines about what they can claim publicly. That's not a content strategy problem. That's an organizational change problem.
That's fair. But bear in mind, the open access movement is making things a lot more visible to a lot of people anyway. But the gating issue is more tractable than the attribution issue. We don't have to gate content. We don't have to put our materials, our white papers, our deep scientific information in PDFs that are behind a gate that the AI can't access. We can make that available in the web. We don't need to hide things behind a form. AI can't cite it if it's there. It doesn't know how good, that it exists if it's behind a form. So we need to create ungated structured summaries. We need to create ungated information anyway, and really about making sure that we've got named authorship, schema markup. Those are really, really important things to do. And there are tools that help you do this. I'm a big fan of a tool by a small developer called Super Schema. And I can instantly start looking at some of those things, and the AIs will generate and push data into the header of pages to help with what sharing the content. That makes it available to the AI at as low a barrier as possible. And that's just so easy to do. And it's the sort of thing we need to start thinking about. So I think it's not just about taking on we need to do SEO, we need to do AEO, we need to do GEO. Now, we need to think about how do we make our materials genuinely available to all of these new channels, this entire new marketing discipline, if you will.
Those are things that we can control, right? The content on our website are things that we can control. The content on these journals, especially the high impact journals, we can't control. And so that's how their subscription model works, that some of it is ungated, but the large majority is gated for subscribers only. That is one aspect that I think needs to be solved in this industry. Another aspect is assuming that legal does sign off, assuming the scientist agrees to be named. Assumption, assumption, assumption. HR and communications and sales can agree on a single company description. The approval cycle alone is soul crushing, right? It can be upwards of a month, framing unrealistic for any organization of meaningful scale. You're describing the output as if the input is trivial.
Um, well, so your argument is that the structural inertia is just too deep to overcome?
My argument is that the barrier is misdiagnosed. If you frame this as a content optimization project, you'll get incremental progress and hit a ceiling. If you frame it as a cross functional mandate, one senior commercial leader who owns AI discoverability and has the authority to move compliance, science, and marketing in the same direction, I think then you might get somewhere. Most organizations haven't made that decision yet, though.
That means the window is open for the ones that do. The competitive dynamic isn't life science versus other industries. It's the life science companies that solve the internal coordination problems first versus the ones that don't. That advantage is real. The question is who captures it first.
Right. And that comes down to leadership, not necessarily a marketing question, but it's leadership and strategy, which is probably why it's not being answered quite yet.
That's hard to dispute. And I think that raising AI and AI literacy, AI maturity, and as part of that, AI discoverability as a leadership conversation is absolutely crucial. The unconsidered set, it's not a knowledge gap. It's a prioritization gap, and it's a leadership prioritization gap. The companies that never ran the test maybe never even thought about it, or maybe they assumed they were fine. Some of them will be right. They'll be there. But a quarter aren't there. And the ones who were right today may not be right in 12 months' time, because citation compression does not pause when you decide whether to take it seriously or not. It keeps going. And the brands building AI visibility now are not just winning referrals. They are setting baseline models default to speak to them, to look for them. The baseline gets harder to displace the longer it compounds.
But there's also a deeper problem. Life science companies have a structural AI citation advantage that no other industry can replicate. Peer-reviewed content, named experts, verifiable institutional authority. The exact signals AI models weight most heavily in technical domains. But the same culture that produces that advantage, compliance review, distributed ownership, scientists who answer to research directors, not marketing managers, is precisely why most organizations can't access it. The barrier is not awareness, it's more accountability, and nobody owns this right now.
And I guess that's marketing's job. It really has to be our job to elevate this from being a content strategy question to being a leadership question. The companies that will win AI discoverability in life science are not the ones with the best SEO or the most diligent Wikidata updates. They're the ones where a senior commercial leader decides that AI visibility is a cross-functional mandate, names someone accountable for it, and gives that person the authority to move compliance, science, and marketing all in the same direction. Most organizations haven't made that decision yet. Most of them aren't even thinking about it yet. The ones that do are not just solving a discoverability problem. They're building a structural position their competitors will spend years trying to close. The question is not whether to act. It's whether your organization has both the authority and the incentive to make it happen.
So maybe a good place to end here is a call to action to all those leaders that are listening to us, or those who are listening and have leaders who aren't quite grappling with this issue yet, to get on it. This is your opportunity. Leveraging it now is going to be really, really critical to the future of your business.
Absolutely. It's been fascinating to dig into this, and thank you for the great conversation, Jasmine.
Thank you, Matt. See everybody again soon at the next episode of A Splice of Life Science Marketing.
Thank you for listening to A Splice of Life Science Marketing. We hope you enjoyed the episode.
If this conversation helped you, the single biggest way you can support the show is to subscribe and leave a review on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. We'd really appreciate it, and it makes a huge difference.
You can find out more about us and the topics we discuss at striven.com or on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for listening. We hope to see you next time.